Hi there. My name is Dakota Palicki, Director at Civic Lab, and you're watching a presentation of the College to Jobs Data Initiative. Civic Lab's a nonprofit institute dedicated to helping teams and partnerships solve complex social challenges. We convene the National Talent Network, a group of nearly 100 cross-sector partnerships in the United States that collaborate to connect learning to economic opportunity in the places they call home. Every other month, the National Talent Network gathers to learn about new initiatives, tools, and resources. In June of 2023, we came together to learn about the College to Jobs Data Initiative, a partnership among several schools at Harvard University and Lightcast, with the goal of connecting post-secondary education and labor market data. The tool has tremendous potential for local, regional, and state partnerships that work together to align talent supply to talent demand. In this presentation, we are going to hear from Ali Epstein and Isaiah Baldessera from the Harvard Kennedy School, who helped develop and launch the tool. Joining them is Joel Simon, Vice President of Strategy and Growth at Lightcast, who has served as a key data partner to the initiative. If you want to learn more about this work, be sure to check out the links in the video description. Thanks again for watching. Let's get started. So with that brings us to today's conversation. As you know, at Civic Lab, we are practitioners. We ourselves design and operate partnerships at the local, regional, state, and national levels. So when we find a great resource or tool that we love and we start using our own work, we always get very eager to share it with you, our network of partners and fellow practitioners. The College to Jobs Data Initiative was one of those tools that I was instantly eager to bring to this group. I came upon it in a variety of ways and started digging into the data, and we shared it at one of our community practice meetings. And I could just tell that it's such a powerful tool to folks that are locally and regionally minded. So as part of the Project on Workforce at Harvard, the team that you're going to meet today created this interactive data tool that gives leaders like us regional information to better connect higher education and workforce data. There's a lot to dig in today, so I'm really eager to stop talking and get to it. Please join me in welcoming Ali, Isaiah, and Joel to our community today. Team, thank you all so much for joining us and sharing your work. Ali, why don't you take it away from here?
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today's conversation. Before we get started, I'm just going to walk us through a quick agenda. Thought I'd share a little bit of a background on the Project on Workforce. I'll hand it off to Joel to share a little bit about Lightcast and what they do. And then we'll jump into an overview of the College to Jobs Initiative and the College to Jobs map more specifically. I'll hand it off to my colleague, Isaiah Baldessera, who will walk us through a demo. And then, as Dakota mentioned, we'll have an open floor discussion. Would love for people to use the chat and the Q&A function for us to get a conversation going. Great. So who is the Project on Workforce? We sit at Harvard. We're a cross-disciplinary project between three schools here at Harvard: the Harvard Graduate School of Education, the Harvard Kennedy School, and the Harvard Business School. Our research primarily focuses at the intersection of education and the labor market. And to really get to that, move towards that research agenda, we have two missions that underpin our research, which is one, building more and better pathways towards economic mobility. And also our second mission is building smoother transitions between education and the workforce, which is why we pursue the College to Jobs Initiative, which we'll speak about a little bit more in a bit. Just wanted to share a snapshot of our team. Our leadership reflect our cross-disciplinary approach. From the Harvard Kennedy School, we have David Deming, who serves as our faculty co-director. From the School of Education, we have Peter Blair. I'll also note that Robert Schwartz serves as a senior advisor and is a professor emeritus from the School of Education. And we have two faculty co-directors from the business school, Joe Fuller and Rafaela Sudan. Unfortunately, they weren't able to join us today, but we have two associate directors, Carrie McKittrick and Natalie Gazaneo. And then to conduct the College to Jobs research, we were able to enlist Harvard's best assets, its students. So we pulled together people from across the graduate schools and undergraduate schools to help conduct the research. And we were able and fortunate to work with Lightcast, which Joe will share a little bit more about in a second. But they were great partners and collaborators on the College to Jobs map, providing job postings data, but also just a lot of thought collaboration around the tool. So with that, I'll hand it off to Joel to share a little bit more about Lightcast.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you happen to be. It's a pleasure to be with you. It's always good to be among friends in the talent network and among the talent hubs. And thanks, Dakota, for inviting us today. And we're thrilled to be a part of this project and to be working with Ali and Isaiah and team on this. If you don't know, Lightcast is in the labor market data business. We watch the job market. We watch it closely and every day in every direction. And let me tell you, it's been a pretty interesting time to be watching that these last couple of years. We're proud to share that data quite broadly, certainly with educational institutions and systems, with workforce development, economic development, and companies as well. And we're proud to be able to contribute to the conversation around the changing face of work and how educational institutions, communities, and partnerships can be a positive force along that very tumultuous timeline. I'm going to go ahead to the next couple of slides here. Yeah, so as you can see, we like to talk about this stuff and certainly are in good company with the project on workforce. But the data that we have to contribute, we're very proud of and really what we wanted to expose you to today. And so on the next slide, we talk about the data that we bring to bear here. And so number one is the government data, right? And you all have access to Bureau of Labor Statistics, ONET, census data, et cetera. And we're very proud of how we take that great deal of data and distill it and organize it and express it so it can be more easily accessed and used and parsed so we can look at it at the community level, the state level, multi-state, region, national, or what have you, to give us all sorts of opportunities to do comparison and contrasting and see where we are in this labor market. And to that public data, we add our own proprietary data sources coming largely from job postings and professional social profiles. And what that gives us the opportunity to do is to take that big government data and look at it through a somewhat different lens. So government data is great, but we also know there's a little bit of a lag. And so we are able to not watch just on the government cadence, but we watch how jobs get posted every day. Literally every day, we can track changes in the labor market and we can see what jobs are up or down, how are salaries changing, how are skill requirements changing, credential requirements, et cetera. And we're able to organize that skills data into our open skills taxonomy, which we invite you to use and access as you're trying to decode the labor market where you are. And then we also use individuals' reports of their own career trajectories, and that's through the social profiles, right? So we can see how they move from one position to another and how their career advancement has tracked with their educational experiences as well. And so when we think about folks like you or folks in your communities and how that data gets used, certainly in economic development, workforce development, and education, we enable folks either through our software solutions, through our consulting projects, and through our customized tools like Ali and Isaiah are going to walk you through later on today, thinking about things like how do we understand the skills in our community so we can attract more businesses and advance our economic activity? How do we promote our region's advantages and making sure that we're a home to good businesses and for students and institutions? How do we help our institutions understand what our companies want, right? Are we teaching the right things? Are we signaling them in the right way? And are we able to reach out to the employers that matter, not just the ones that we happen to know about through our regular lives, but really use a big data approach to really see sort of what's going on within our industries, how different people can apply consistent skills maybe across your economy, right? Not just in a single industry, but how those people and skills become valuable more broadly, and really being able to keep your finger on the pulse of the regional economy so you as local and regional partnerships can adapt and make sure that the opportunities that we're preparing folks for are indeed the ones that are abundant and of high quality wherever you happen to be. And we express this data largely through our software products, but also through our consulting and our custom analyses where we can almost invent new ways of looking at data based on keywords, based on emerging skills. We're looking at things like the infrastructure investments, and we're looking at things like the CHIPS Act, where there's stuff that isn't quite captured in the public sector data, but how do we stay ahead of that curve so we can reorient ourselves to those broader economic realities. And when it comes to finding partners with whom to do this, certainly our friends at Harvard are longtime partners of ours on a number of custom research projects. And this ability to balance out what's happening in our schools with what's happening in our economy. We're really proud to be able to contribute to this conversation and to this tool. And we really think that the Ali and Isaiah and team have rendered these data in a way that's really elegant, that hopefully gives you a lot of guidance as you really calibrate your efforts to the real opportunities as they are today and as we project them to be going forward.
Before we jump into the College to Jobs initiative and what it is, I thought it'd be helpful to share the why. So some of you may be familiar with this chart, but the economics literature proves that the more education you have, the more money you have. And so this chart shows that those who have a bachelor's degree or higher are earning more than those who don't. And not only is this true, but it's getting more true. We can see since 1963, this gap has really widened and become quite stark. Yet, I'm sure you all are seeing polls being released or hearing this through the news you read or from people you know. Americans are becoming increasingly skeptical of whether the value of college is still worth it. And I think this is largely due to two things. One, student debt has become a huge crisis in the US. It's a 1.3 trillion issue that doesn't look like it will be solved anytime soon. And then two, there's this perceived skills gap between what Americans believe is taught in the classroom versus what employers are demanding in the marketplace. Americans are increasingly skeptical about whether a college degree actually trains you or prepares you for the workforce. And so two stats that we like to refer to here that I'll call out now. Only about 1/4 of working US adults with college experience strongly agree that their education is relevant to their work and day-to-day life. And almost 60% of Americans say that the higher education system in the US fails to provide good value for the money students and their families spend. So this is becoming an increasing issue, which is what really underpins the College Jobs Initiative and why we decided to pursue this research agenda. So just a little bit about the College Jobs Initiative. It's a multi-year research and practice project that is focused on community colleges, public four-year institutions, HBCUs and MSIs. And our goal with this project is to increase attention and investment in college degree transitions and really show how colleges can better deliver on their promise of economic prosperity. The two work streams that I'll share a little bit more in a bit, applied research and public data tool, cover our college jobs playbook and our college jobs map. But I'll also just point out here, we have three other work streams in the work. One is our innovation pilots, which we've done for the past 2 summers, and we just kicked off yesterday for our 3rd summer. This is a partnership that we have with our students and with colleges, federal policymakers, city governments to help accelerate and expand effective practices for smoothing the transition from college to the workforce. We also see convening power is really pivotal to increasing attention and investment in college to career transitions. And so later this month, we'll be hosting a series of conversations to identify priorities for policy and practice change. And then lastly, I think this work stream can actually span across the 4 other work streams, but it's worth calling it out as its own. We're working on ways to amplify our findings and recommendations through op-eds and through conversations like this. So that's an overview of the College to Jobs Initiative. I thought before I jump into the College to Jobs map, I'd share a little bit about our College to Jobs playbook, which is a nice complement to the map. The College to Jobs playbook attempts to answer this question: what can colleges, employers, policymakers, and others do to launch college students onto successful career trajectories? And we started this by answering this question by conducting a large literature review. We reviewed over 530 pieces of literature to understand and classify 13 programs that connect college students to high-paying careers. And you can see those interventions listed on the right-hand side. The interventions span from co-ops to apprenticeships to career coaching and cohort programming. And what we decided to do is summarize the research behind these programs, as well as their prevalence and practice and feasibility of implementation, to make it quite clear for stakeholders to understand what research exists on these interventions and to be able to measure the strength of the research. And then lastly, in the playbook, we have a set of recommendations that provides a comprehensive picture of the actions that stakeholders can take to improve college students' jobs and earnings outcomes. And so I preface the college jobs playbook before talking about the college jobs map, because we see this as a solutions-oriented, actions-oriented playbook that shares information on what people can do when they realize that there is this disconnect between the education and labor market. And so we view the playbook as the solutions, the map is our challenge. So before I jump into sharing a little bit more about what the map offers, I thought I'd share our origin story for the map. So we decided to conduct a landscape analysis to understand what data or data visualizations existed on education and employment data. And what we found is that there's actually really rich data out there on education and institutions in the higher ed system. However, what we noticed is that data sits at the institution level, so it's hard to tell what's happening within a region in aggregate. And so what we wanted this tool, or what we saw as an opportunity for this tool to offer, is that regional picture and to show in aggregate what's happening across a higher education system. And then what we also saw as a huge opportunity areas, despite employment being an outcome of education, rarely is education and employment data linked. And we saw that there's this great need to link education and employment data and also apply that regional lens to that data as well. And then lastly, an opportunity area that we found in our landscape analysis was we heard through conversations we were having with regional stakeholders and policymakers that a lot of decisions are made through anecdote or from what policymakers are hearing from constituents. And sometimes it's hard to find the data to back that decision making. And if the data does exist, it sits in CSV files or Excel files, and it's harder for the average person to navigate. And so what we thought would be really useful to create was a data tool that would be easy to use, one-stop shop, and can help inform those local conversations and strategies for folks like yourself, economic development practitioners, educators, employers, and policymakers. So our hope is with the college jobs map, it does just that. It can help inform those conversations and provide the data needed to make informed policy decisions. Just before I hand it off to my colleague Isaiah to lead you through a demo of the tool, I thought I'd share just a quick snapshot of the data sources that are incorporated into the tool. On the education side, we use College Scorecard and iPads data to display institution characteristics, student demographics, degrees offered, and any further additional institution characteristics. And on the employment side, we use the American and Puerto Rican Community Survey data and the Bureau of Labor Statistics data to show population counts by occupation, employment status, demographics, and other occupational growth projections. So those two data sources really help us visualize worker trends, but what we felt was missing was the unmet demand. So the job postings data, or the jobs that exist that are just going unfilled. And that was really the impetus for our partnership with Lightcast. Lightcast has this rich data that Joel just shared that provides information on job postings and that unmet need in a region. So we incorporate Lightcast data as well, which you'll see momentarily. And then to map education data to employment data, we use the NCES SIPSOC crosswalk, which matches fields of studies to jobs. The last two data variables that are on this slide, I'll talk about briefly. Opportunity Insights is a research initiative headed by Raj Chetty here at Harvard. He has a number of research and data sources available, but we use the mobility report card data, which looks at the economic mobility scores by institution. Isaiah will talk about that a little bit more in the demo. And then we also do some forecast modeling in the tool, which you'll see momentarily, and we use projection central long-term employment projections to inform that forecast modeling. With that, I'll hand it over to Isaiah to walk you through a demo of the tool.
Great, thanks, Allie. Hi, everyone. So I know we've got folks from all over today, from higher ed, economic development, workforce, philanthropy, private sector, and more. So I'm going to keep this demo quite high level and brief so that we can get into questions about what you are all interested in specifically. So the college to jobs map here visualizes data on colleges, economic mobility, graduation and employment rates, as well as job postings data from our friends at Lightcast. And basically the goal is for users to explore how local worker trends align with college graduate growth in regions across the US from 2014 to 2019. We can talk about why we've got that time period in the Q&A there. So as you see here, we've got two maps actually, college graduate data, which is the default. We've got the labor market data map as well here. You can toggle between the two. Let's start with the default here. So each of these dots represents a college. Click on the college. Click on the college here to get some information. And the colleges are color-coded by economic mobility rate. If you're ever unsure, you can always hover over these explainer question mark icons here. Now let's toggle off the colleges for a moment. And here we see the underlying map. These are geographic regions where people live and work. And the colors represent the growth rate among college graduates. So as you can see here, the high-level map shows the regions and basically the selected occupations here. So graduate growth rate for the selected occupations and the institution types. Of course, you can choose here. There's some specialty designation institutions here. You can toggle on and off. We've also got a number of other filters that you can play around with here. Let's choose a region here. So let's see something that stands out on the East Coast. Okay, let's say Dover, Delaware. So if we take a look here, we've got information on the graduates themselves. We've got specifics on all of the colleges that fall within this region. We've got graduate demographics, as well as some trends here. You can toggle between the percentage and absolute numbers. All right, let's zoom out. And again, you can use these to toggle. So say we're interested in computer and math. Here you can see how that changes. And let's say we're looking for perhaps underrepresented groups. There you go. You can see how that eliminates certain areas and regions. Okay, let's go over to the labor market data map here. All right, so here we've color-coded based on what we're calling a mismatch score. And this measures how worker growth compares to graduate growth across the country. If you can't read the fine print here, this is dark green is graduate growth outpacing worker growth, dark purple worker growth outpacing graduate growth. Let's zoom in on a place that's fairly balanced. Let's say Laredo, Texas here. All right, again, we've got some information. One thing to point out, job openings jumping almost 50% in this time period. Again, that's information that we've gathered from Lightcast data. We've got labor market data, some year-over-year trends about this region. Got occupation data. Some information on worker demographics, college data, which is the same as you saw in the previous map, as well as some forecast data here as well. Okay, let's zoom out. And again, you've got fewer filters for this map, but you can look at the education level from high school diploma all the way up to doctoral degree. And obviously you can filter by education and so forth. A couple things to note here, again, before we get into Q&A pretty quick. We've got a lot of data. If you want to dig deeper into it, if you're a researcher, for example, you can download the data here in CSV format and explore it. Also got this Explore Stories tab. So, a question we often get is, how do you make sense of all of this information? And what we've done is broken it down, pulled out some things that we found particularly interesting. So in this case, is higher ed keeping up with the labor market. We've highlighted some top 10 lists, certain regions. So you can kind of see our deep dive and our analysis of some of this information here. So we encourage you to check these out as well. This might actually be a good place to start if you're wondering where to start. As well as we've got a guide, some FAQ. So Ali's gone through some of those specifics, but if you're ever wondering, you can just click down here in the bottom left. And a shameless plug, you would follow us on LinkedIn. We've got a number of research projects. Actually, today we just launched a book, Community Colleges as the American Economic Engines, information on apprenticeships and things you may find interesting. Also got a newsletter. We posted that in the chat. So I'll hand it back over to Ali. And like I said, we'll do our best to answer your questions. And if we can't, we'll follow up afterwards.
Great. Thanks, Isaiah. Yeah, as we wait for questions to filter in, I know one question that Joel and I spoke about yesterday is this tool was our first start at our first attempt at creating something that would be useful for economic development practitioners and policymakers, folks like you. So we'd love to hear from you on what it would take for you to continue to use the tool, what you find most useful, what is the most interesting, what's missing, anything that would help us in the future iterate on the tool and build a better product. So the question just popped up in the chat. Do you plan to build in industry recognized credentials valued by regional industry sectors? That is a great question, and not the first time we've received that question. We are limited by the data that's available. And so we were, for the education side, we were limited by college scorecard and iPads. I think it'd be great to include industry recognized credentials. I think that's definitely a future aspiration of the tool. I think, and maybe I didn't state this earlier, kind of the call to action around the tool that we really want to rally around is the fact that it is incredibly easy now to collect data, and there's so much rich data out there, but there isn't a clear way to connect all the data sources and display and visualize them. And we think that so many decisions could be made easier if this data was just displayed in a much more clean, user-friendly way. And so I think it'd be great if we had better data and publicly available data on industry recognized credentials. It's just a limitation that we're dealing with right now.
The industry recognized credential universe can be a bit larger and perhaps even more chaotic than the degree and the academic universe. And so it is tricky to be able to take that much data and to be able to sort it and express it in a way that's clean. And frankly, what constitutes industry recognized, right? We see a lot of industry recognized credentials showing up in our jobs postings data, and by virtue of them showing up in the data, so, well, some industry member has recognized them, but how much is enough? Is it 10%, 20%, 40%, right? And so we'd love your feedback on what would constitute sort of a critical mass that would allow us to say, yes, this is worth tracking among the dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of credentials that are out there.
I'm sure we have a few, because I know I'm getting some text from some folks that were eager to get into the chat. So I'll give some folks some typing time. Jess does have one here. So we'll take Jess's. I have one for you as well. So we'll take Jess's first.
Happy to answer Jess's question. And yeah, this is a great point. Another shameless plug. We actually recently conducted an analysis on the WIOA data set and published a paper on our findings from that. And so, I think it'd be great to incorporate the organizations that are registered through WIOA in the tool. And that's actually something we've discussed because we have this simultaneous project. Taking a step back, we have the project on workforce is a number of different research agendas that ladder up to our mission. College to Jobs is one. We also have this other research initiative that we call the Workforce Almanac Project, which is doing, it is trying to create a large database of workforce development programs across the country. And so one internal discussion we've had, and this is really based on what the longevity of the tool looks like and how useful this tool is to practitioners, is to see how we could, once that database is built of workforce development organizations across the country, how we could, in a future state of the tool, incorporate that data into the tool to show not only degree recognized institutions, but also workforce development programs and how that matches to employment trends in regions across the country. So yeah, it's something we've talked about, something we're considering. I guess the piece that we haven't talked about as much is partnering with the Department of Labor. But I think that's a really interesting idea and something I'll share with our team. Just catching up on the chat to see if there are any other questions.
Yeah,
the demo was pretty quick. Oh, sorry, Dakota, did I cut you off?
No, it's all good. I guess one of my questions too is, as I was digging into this and looking at some of the regions that I know, and even like, my hometown of Chicago has a mismatch score of, what was that, like -52 or something like that. And I guess I was curious of, as we look at the mismatch scoring, how much influence you think commuting or in and out migration impacts mismatch score. Like, are there certain areas, we know from like the Heartland Forward, produced a report looking at the last decade of data at metros that have been, net producers of talent. Does that get accounted for in that mismatch score, or is that like, I don't know, help me understand that.
Yeah, great question. So we use metropolitan statistical areas to define a region. And so that captures, like, I think between 50 to 100 miles within a metro region. So it accounts for those migration patterns. Unfortunately, it does not account for the migration patterns between counties. That is a limitation that we have faced with the data. We can't see where graduates move after they graduate. And we can't see if people are moving counties. But with that said, a report that was published by MC Burning Glass before they were Lightcast. Joel, I don't know if that's the proper citation.
That's fine.
We do know that about 40% of graduates, based on this one research study, about 40% of graduates from a public four-year institution tend to stay within the region after graduation, and a little bit over 60% of graduates from community colleges stay within the region. So although we're limited by the data and by migration pattern, there are some strong statistics that show people do stay in the regions where they graduate. And I did see, Barbara, your question about, or was it Nancy? Or no, Barbara, what would be a basic research question that could be answered by the map? That is such a good question. There are so many questions that could be answered. But one that we talk about a lot is looking at occupational segregation. So don't cite me on these numbers. I'm going to do my best to recall what I remember, but poking around, for instance, in New Orleans, I think we saw that for jobs that New Orleans is a very diverse city. It has a large Black population. Yet when I was playing around with the tool to see what the demographic makeup looked like for what is considered more high paying careers like engineering, I saw that there was actually strong occupational segregation happening there. So despite, I think, I think it was less than 50% of New Orleans being identifying as white. I think for the occupation engineering, we saw that there was more than 50% of a share of white people who make up engineering jobs in New Orleans. And then vice versa, I think New Orleans, about 33% of the people, give or take, identify as Black in New Orleans, but then a disproportionate amount of Black people make up the lower paid jobs like cleaning and maintenance jobs. And so I think one of the questions I'm really interested in exploring in the tool is what occupational segregation is happening. And then to map that back to education, New Orleans actually has a strong HBCU presence. It has plenty of quote unquote, like degreed, credentialed Black individuals in New Orleans who could fill these jobs. And so it's like, what is happening here? Why is this occupational segregation happening? And I think this tool is a really interesting way to explore that.
I'll throw out, if I could, a couple of other ways that I like to interact with this data, and we'll take one from sort of each side of the coin, right? So you can zoom in on your region and figure out, okay, in what way do we have a surplus of graduates, right? Is our graduate output greater than what's happening in our labor market? You can think of that as you're a talent generation engine, right? And if those folks are not able to find jobs in their fields in the local area, chances are they're going somewhere else to find those jobs, and you're leaking talent. But that can be repurposed as an asset that you can use for business attraction and growth and retention. Hey, if there's an industry that's being served, they can be served better here because we've got a good talent production engine. On the other side of the coin, you can say, hey, if we've got a mismatch that doesn't feel quite so good, right? If we're not producing enough workers, not producing enough folks with degrees in any particular discipline, that'll allow you to be a little bit more targeted, or a lot more targeted, about your enrollment and your recruitment activities, right? And to be able to say to your incoming students, hey, maybe you're choosing a major because you're interested in it, but guess what? Maybe the economic outlook for you in this town might not be as promising, either on just a job availability standpoint, or even digging down deeper into a wage standpoint, or what have you. But perhaps to redirect them and say, hey, if this is exciting you about major A, you can get excited in the same way about major B, for which there are good opportunities, right? And so you can maybe fine tune how students are accessing education in light of what you believe their opportunities are going to be after they graduate. And that's good for them because their economic outlook is better and their employment outlook is better. That's good for your local companies because they don't have to import talent who might run back to their hometown when they get homesick or don't like the weather or whatever reason there might be. And so you can balance out your talent production with your opportunity, whether up or down, in a bit more of a strategic way. And finally, I would say on any of those questions, the ability to ask that question in the aggregate for your community, but then also for each individual institution about their role in their balance or mismatch. And so in a collected way, we say, hey, we've got balances and imbalances in one direction or another. We can arrange ourselves to say, hey, maybe this couple of institutions can really dig in on this industry or this occupational area. And the other set of institutions can cover another part of the field. So we're not busy trying to eat each other's lunch or competing for students or duplicating or being redundant, but rather spreading out across the field so the whole community, both institutions and students, as well, of course, of the companies, can be successful in accessing the talent that they need.
Thanks, Joel. I'll also just add on, I encourage you to go to the tool and just explore where you grew up and what questions you had growing up, and the employment trends you saw in your region, and see if some of those questions could get answered with the tool. I think it's the regional lens. We really hope that people who come from the region can use the tool because they understand the specific regional economy. So we encourage people to go in and answer their own questions as well.
Yeah, there was a question that David had asked in the Q&A. I've given a short answer, but wanted to at least bring it up with everyone here too. He was kind of asking about some of the polls, particularly from Gallup and Strata and Pew and all of them, that are talking about the perception of the value of a college degree and whether or not there's variance by demographic kind of trends. I know I've seen some things that do kind of break that down by political ideology, by demographic factors. I listed one piece in there that I know we've seen and used in the past, but want to make sure that you all had a chance to respond to that if you'd like.
Well, I think folks make risk tolerance assessments in a very rational way, right? And so a lower income family is going to have to bear more risk with that higher price tag. A higher income family, not so much. And so that's where I think you might see some differences in the level of comfort with what we might call sort of the traditional college pathway. And similarly, if you go in feeling like, well, maybe I made a wrong decision, or maybe I can't get the job afterwards, my family can support me for enough time so I can maybe work my way up the ladder a little bit more slowly. That's a different risk profile that you see. Certainly the college price tag, as a parent of college students, I certainly see that, but I also recognize that the risk profile is going to be different depending on how you're approaching the question.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Also, just add, we're Harvard, so I know we're speaking from our ivory tower. But David Deming, one of our faculty co-directors, speaks about this a lot. Elite institutions are kind of the exception, but I think a lot of people think that they're people who they're much more prevalent than they are. And at elite institutions like the Harvards and the Yales and the Stanfords, resources are like thrown at students, like they're given so much to succeed. That is not the norm for a college experience. Most colleges don't have an endowment like Harvard has. And so the experience that a student has at a public four-year institution or community college is going to be a lot different than the experience someone has at Harvard, because Harvard is able to accrue as much wealth as it has over the past centuries it's existed. And it's what's given to students at Harvard should be given to every institution, but because of funding constraints or regional constraints, it's not the case. And so we're trying to figure out ways to like share the wealth and have there be more resources provided to students at institutions that haven't historically had those resources.
I would also add that what you learn in your diploma are not unimportant when it comes out of college, but also important is the networks that you build during that time and the networking capabilities that you build. And again, to David's sort of original question, are we sort of looking towards a sort of a bifurcated sort of society? I think that social capital question is also going to be quite important. And frankly, it worries me, right? And so hopefully we'll be able to figure out some ways to knit that stuff together. And just as with industry recognized credentials or micro learning or MOOCs or whatever it is, where we've democratized a lot of access to learning, thinking about breaking through that barrier on the networking and social capital dimension, I think is also going to be important.
Well, we'll give folks folks, if you have a last minute question, type it in. I guess my final question and kind of goes into some of the LMI data. I mean, a lot of the folks that are on the call, the networks that we work with, sometimes they're really thinking about occupations and trying to build new economies. And sometimes looking at historical LMI information is hard when you're trying to leapfrog. One of the examples, a good case study, that's Walla Walla, Washington, who very quickly moved from primarily agricultural based occupations to tourism, winery, viticulture, horticulture, water management. It's a great success story over a decade. So I guess any recommendations for folks that are looking at the tool and thinking future forward and trying to balance the conversation that they're never going to have of, should we be meeting today's projected workforce demand? Look at how many workers we're not meeting. How do we improve our mismatch score? Because as soon as you put a score on it, everyone wants to, get the higher score, versus balancing that with, how do you pivot to generating new economies, and how can this data be used in that latter conversation as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Which I realized we didn't mention this earlier. So the college to jobs map just looks at 2014 to 2019. And that was for two reasons. One, we started this project in 2021. And when we started this project in 2021, college scorecard data was only available up until 2019. We launched in 2023. So we did end up having the option to incorporate more recent data into the tool. But we were very conflicted because 2020 and 2021, as you all know, were very disruptive years. And it's very unclear right now, even as we sit 3 years out from 2020, where the job market's going. And so we decided to isolate 2014 to 2019 because we thought those were stable enough years where you could take a lens and bring it out and look outside that time zone and see, or time frame, and see, okay, what trends are happening in this period and how might that inform what will happen in the future. And so our belief with the tool is that that time frame will provide some sort of trend indicator of what's happening. However, it's not the latest data. We do plan to eventually update the tool to incorporate more recent data, but it's a difficult question. It's like balancing like recency, timeliness with stability, and trying to figure out like how do we get rid of this noise to understand where the market's moving or what jobs are becoming increasingly in demand. And so that's a really good question, Dakota. I don't know of a great answer for you, but I think our hope is that this tool can kind of show where those trends are moving, and hopefully that's an indicator for the future.
I would suggest looking at it in a few ways. So number one is if there's a certain occupation and the number this year is bigger than the number last year, and the projection for next year is bigger than this year, we know that's a growing occupation, and that's something to pay attention to. I would also say it's pretty rare that an occupation is born or dies, right? They stick around for a long time, but they do change and they do evolve. And when one is born, it's usually spun out of another one. And so we don't get to it in this tool, but we spend a lot of time thinking about skills changes, right? And how do skills evolve? And so it may be that we find an emerging skill that doesn't show up as dominant, right? Maybe it's only in 6% of job postings. Well, but last year it was only 3%, and the year before that it was 1%, and the year before that it was 0%. Percentage-wise, those changes are really awesome. And so that can really telegraph where things are going, not necessarily to say, oh, we're going to prepare somebody for a different occupation, but how we prepare them, that makes a difference. And often you'll find that some of those oncoming skills also offer a salary premium. And so when somebody is going through their educational process, okay, yeah, I'm preparing to be this kind of worker, but if I'm have this kind of worker with this software skill or that communication skill or what have you, that can pay dividends in the labor market as well. So a layer down on that, the skills DNA gets really important, but when you're trying to stay ahead of the curve of a changing economy.
Okay, not seeing any more questions. Let me just say, Allie, Isaiah, Joel, thank you so much for spending a bit of your afternoon with us today and showing us your great work. Again, it was a tool that very quickly a lot of us jumped right into. We're eager to get into the data. So I'm just very grateful that you decided to spend a little bit of time with us and show us the tool, walking around, and encourage us to use it. Folks, if you do have follow-up questions or if you want to dig into some data sources more or anything like that, you're welcome to email me and I'll put you in touch with these great folks. You can also just follow them on LinkedIn, reach them there. Allie put her email in the chat as well. They're all great people. So, I know that they'd be happy to chat with you. But for now, I just want to say thank you again for everyone for joining us today. I hope that you have a great rest of the afternoon and put this great data to work. And if you find yourself using it and want to share how you're using it, keep us informed. Let me know. I'd love to learn how everyone else is using it too. So with that, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great week, everyone.
Thank you.